beyond this doubt when you start really, really working with this and saying, I'm going there. I'm going to leave the doubt behind. But that is the challenge for the human in this world, because we've been programmed by TV, by media, by a million things. You know, by our bosses, our sisters, our siblings, our friends, constantly giving us their point of view on things. And the brain is a programmable computer. So it receives those messages and it takes them in. So, yeah, let me just finish one other thing. The other thing is with lost animals, this happens a lot too, because lost animals, I teach a lost animals course. I do help a lot of people find their lost animals quite successfully. But if an animal's done with his contract and he's lost, it sometimes is because he's ready to go on somewhere else and work with someone else. And so when they're functioning in one of these three modalities, and of course there's a lot of overlap, the healers, the teachers, and the ones who are just here to have a great experience and experience life in the 3D world, when they're overlapping on those, they might be done with one experience and they're ready to go on to something else. And I can tell you for sure, I have a very clear read on Frodo, and that's exactly what.
Yeah, he disappeared into thin air. It's like he was there 1 minute, and then in second, it just disappeared. It was very odd.
Yeah.
But I got that hit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for confirming that.
Yeah. Did you have
Did you say you felt like it was a suicide mission before you left? Did you kind of a feel of that?
Well, because it was 1 minute, between the time that I let him out to go in the front yard, which is fenced, and then I went inside and came out. It was about 1 minute, 30 seconds later, and he just poof, disappeared into thin air, and I knew, Frodo's gone, and it's okay. He needs to go somewhere else.
See, but
then 5 minutes later, we found out that he had run down to
But you still
Melrose.
felt it was okay.
Oh yeah, I knew it was okay.
To me, that's so easy for you to look at it in that mature way. But of course, your daughter and her husband are going to be
right.
Right, their perspective was different.
Well, because the thing is that really we don't have to anything, but it's always good if we can remind ourselves the human point of view is the point of view that we are operating from.
And what he was teaching me was different than what he was teaching them.
That's right.
And I bet if it had been your dog, you would have felt like them.
Well, I'm not so
of what
sure
you
about
learned.
that. Maybe it's my time of life, and because I've had a good teacher to help me and other good teachers to help me understand that death is not death.
Yeah.
Per se, I understand at this age in my life that death is not death for me, and for my daughter and her husband, they have a different perspective on death, so they have a different way of processing. But I noticed that their way of processing was more related to guilt and shame, and mine was more related to I mean, I hate to judge it, but just to say it, it was coming more from a place of guilt and shame than mine was more Frodo's stoked.
Here's the thing.
Doing something else, and he wanted to do something else.
Here's the thing. It's really good, really helpful to understand this. And this is also scientifically valid. Everything is energy, and every particle of energy and every subatomic particle and all the space in between, which is all a bunch of space actually, is moving at a speed, a vibrational rate. And certain things vibrate at different speeds and rates. So the things that vibrate at slower rates are things like fear, worry, doubt, anxiety, frustration, shame, blame, judgment, sadness, grief. What those things do, by the way, they move so slow, in a lot of cases they metastasize. Mm-hmm. They turn into dis-ease. And divorce, the 3 Ds, death, those bad things that we deem as bad. But when you start moving up the ladder of the vibrational scale, so to speak, and up being relative, what we start moving into is joy, happiness, health, bliss, well-being, prosperity, abundance, opulence, peace, harmony. And these things move so fast. And the goal, really, if you think about the human experience and the physical experience, is to get from moving from down here, so to speak, to up here. Right? Isn't that what we all want? Yeah. So if we can start to release these things and move to these things, we start to have a new perspective. And this is truth. Everything is perspective. everything is in the mind. That's what psychic means, by the way. You have in your brain a pineal and a pituitary gland in the center of your brain. Those are sensory glands. They sense things. That's where your inner knowing comes from, part of it. And the problem in human societies, we haven't been using it. What happens when you don't use something?
It atrophies.
Yeah, you lose it. Why do you think Rush Limbaugh can't hear? Why do you think Dick Cheney doesn't have a heart?
Never did.
If you don't use it, you lose it. So that's what's happened to the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. But that's what psychics call it, the third eye. Well, I don't really care what you call it. It's there. I like to use it. It really helps me. Helps me navigate through life. Helps me know helps me choose happiness. Helps me choose these higher vibrational energies. Helps me help other people who are dealing with things like pet loss and pet grief. And be compassionate for them, to understand that pain. If I hadn't gone through that, I'll tell you, Kenya is what really ignited the compassion in me. I was not a very compassionate person when I went to Maui. I walked in there, started telling everybody in Maui Humane Society all the things they were doing wrong. They didn't want to hear it, of course. Right? So I had to develop that compassion gene, which I now know is the most important gene you can have on the planet right now.
So this is a human-animal question. It's a really controversial, but I'm going to ask it. So Rick Santorum, he's Santorum?
I think so.
Okay, he is running for president. And he just made the statement that many women are up in arms about. He said that if a woman is sexually assaulted and is pregnant by the rapist, that she should have the baby. So in his mind, I really feel that he thinks this is all about compassion and a life. But some women, they're like, oh no, we would have to terminate that pregnancy. And it's interesting because before you were like, anger attracts anger. So the woman that would have happened to, most likely was out of power and anger that it happened to her. So now we can terminate, or we can be compassionate and go through it. And I'm just kind of wondering, it's really controversial, and if you don't want to answer it,
there's pretty much nowhere I won't go.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure, is your question, why does this happen, or if you could pose it in the question so I can answer it very specifically for what you want to know. Is it, why does this happen, or what's my point of view on it, or how does this relate to choice, or?
I think that where he's coming from is compassion, but maybe
For the unborn child.
right. But also there's the
Not for the
ignorance, right? There's the
Yeah.
ignorance of not being the woman, right? Exactly. So, yeah, I guess.
Okay,
there's
well,
a couple-
so I got it. So here's the thing. Number one, okay, this is probably a very radical new approach, but what we have right now is, in current science, we've been told we have 2 strands of DNA. And actually that's not true. Science does recognize that there are what they call 10 additional strands of junk strands of DNA. That's not true either. They're not junk. And in fact, there's more than 10, but I don't know if science has documented that yet, or even knows it yet. I don't know. But the thing is it's the compassion gene that ignites the rest of the genes, of the strands of the DNA. So compassion is enormously important. Now, here's the thing about specifically with that is, if you know have you ever heard of the work of Byron Katie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Byron Katie talks about this quite openly, how there's 1,000 hers in a room. And so everybody's seeing through their unique perspective of who Byron Katie is. And so each one of them, if there's 1,000 people in the room, they all have an opinion of who she is, and none of them are the real one. They're just those people's perspectives. So if this presidential candidate and by the way, I don't buy into any of that. The voting polls are all rigged. So I have a very, I know where my vote really counts. And if you think your vote doesn't count in the quantum field, that's not true. Your vote in the quantum field counts. When you say, my intention is to live in a world where we have organized groups of people who actually do serve the people, who really care about the people and not just what's in their pocketbooks, and using the people to be slaves for them, stealing from the people. You see, your vote does count with the quantum field. Your vote does count with Creator. It's just that most people don't know it, so they don't use it. They're not voting. Yeah, in an election poll, that's a whole other story, right? We already know there's tons of stories out there about how they're rigged. But so there's a million different viewpoints on what's compassionate. The only thing is the energy doesn't lie. There's only one kind of energy of compassion. The energy of compassion. That's it. So if this guy, this presidential candidate, is not really being compassionate, and instead he's just trying to piss off a lot of people or gain votes with some moral majority or whatever he's doing, he's not actually being compassionate, no matter how he lies and uses the media to manipulate. Which is what the media does. I mean, most of the media is manipulating the people, consciously and deliberately. So by, using brain waves and stuff, by accessing parts of your brain when you're vegging out in front of the TV and you're just sitting there like, using your alpha brainwave, which is just this meditative state. And something comes on TV that says you should fight and you should war and we should have this argument, we should have this fight with Iran and, do you need this pill to cure your depression? And your brainwave, alpha brainwave's just going, yeah. Yeah. You're being programmed. We all are. We all have been. So coming back to this DNA and this compassion gene and all of this, when you start coming into your inner power and using that pineal and pituitary gland, suddenly you start to know the truth. You can't be programmed anymore. You're tapping into the power within, right? So compassion genes don't lie. They're resonant with compassion energy. And whatever media propaganda is going on there to try to convince you or get you riled up in that little drama so you're not connecting with the source within you, because that's what that's all about. Like, let's just call it for what it is. It's designed to distract you from the truth of who you are during this most pivotal time on earth, which is about really Creator's wish for us to wake up. But Creator won't override our free will. It's your choice. You want to pay attention to stuff on TV or you want to get connected to, I'm saying you, but I mean all of us. Do we want to get connected to our source? And that means we have to turn off that news media propaganda and really go to that place within where we know the truth of who we are, which is love and bliss and peace and harmony and happiness. That is the truth of who we are. Does that help? Okay.
And I just want to say, in answer to your thing, I don't want to give the impression that I didn't suffer grief or loss from Frodo. I felt it was ordained and he had agreed to go. But I also feel grief and pain. It's very painful to feel his loss, even though he wasn't my dog. But I spent time with him a lot and have known him for years. And I did experience grief.
But grief or loss, this is what's so interesting, because I'm hearing you say good. And I'm wondering what part of you thinks that someone must suffer grief or loss to demonstrate how much they love. I mean, I cry about Kenya every day. Okay. But when I'm crying about her, that is not love. That is pain and that is grief. It's not love. It's not even the honoring. Now, this is the thing I really want to say most of all, because I connect with people's animals who have crossed almost on a daily basis. I do readings for clients who want to connect with their animals who have crossed, animals who are going through end-of-life stages, animals who are, making decisions about euthanasia, people with their animals. And it's tormenting because that love is so strong. And really what we don't always realize, especially for a non-animal parent or guardian, and by the way, I never say animal owner. We can't own a living being. It's impossible to own a living being. But that grief, that torment, I mean, it's very real. But in truth, what the animals just want from us is to completely honor them and love them and be happy and joyful and connected to our source, and to know that we can still connect with them at any time. Anytime. And they're not asking for us to suffer or grieve their death, actually. And there is some belief, I know this from Kenya, from working with so many healers and communicators and psychics, gifted people who are tapped in, who have said, what part of you thinks you need to suffer, Lori, to demonstrate how much you love this dog? Why are you holding on to the grief and the suffering to demonstrate that kind of love?